If you're trying to study more to feel better, stop. Here are 4 steps to study less and score higher. I'll show you exactly what to skip without risking your grade dropping or guessing on what to study. Hi, if you're new here, I'm Danielle. I'm a high school math teacher for the last 20 years. Here on this channel, I share my best strategies for high school math students to study math with ease. So if you're a high school math student, definitely hit subscribe down below. So you're probably thinking, how does studying less for exams actually work? There's just so much to study, but knowing what to study helps you not overstudy. As a math teacher, I've created so many exams. I know exactly what to tell students so they feel confident with what they're studying and they're not overdoing it. Are you ready for the biggest teacher secret? Exams are created with only the main topics from the semester on them. If you've taken a math exam before, think back to it for just 1 second. If you try to remember the questions that were on there, they were just the overarching, bigger style questions that you needed to know from the semester. Take a grade 9 exam, for example. We had to do slope of a line, equations of perpendicular and parallel lines. We had to do exponents and polynomials. We had to do rational numbers. But it was just those major topics. That's it. Your unit tests are way too detailed compared to an exam. So that Unit 3 question that was out of this world won't be on your exam. So if you want to plan together and get the exact study map I give my students, download the exam planner below and we can go through this together. This mini planner tackles my 4-step study system. Here's what the system looks like. We first start out by asking very clear, juicy questions to our teacher. These questions help create the roadmap to studying. From there, we organize what we have to study in a lesson tracker, and then I teach you my 4 steps to studying using my lesson looping. After that, here at Zen Math, we offer you a mock exam, or we teach you how to create one for yourself so you can practice what you studied. If you look in the mini planner, you're going to see very specific questions. These questions start by asking, when is your exam date? Because that's super important. What units are going to be covered on the exam? What is the mark breakdown? Sometimes there are going to be a certain number of knowledge questions, application questions, or thinking questions. And it's very beneficial to know how many marks are allotted to each kind of questions. Do you have any other summatives, final CPTs, assignments that are going to be due before the exam? Because that's going to affect how we plan our studying. How many days of exam review does your teacher plan to do in class with you or give you to study in class? What are the exam style questions? Are there a certain chunk of multiple choice questions, short answer, word problems? And then of course, what formulas are going to be on your exam? Because the less we have to memorize, the better. So in your little mini planner, you have space for you to document all this information. If you're too shy to go ask your teacher these questions in class, then feel free to send them in an email. But I can guarantee there are other kids in the class that are going to be dying to know these answers, and they're going to definitely make you look like you're on top of things and know exactly what you're doing. All right, now we are ready to jump into our lesson tracker. So another little secret, your exam is based off of all the lessons and the questions in your lessons that the teacher covered over the semester. That's it. You don't have to redo your homework again, redo your tests. The mass majority of those questions on your exam are coming from your lessons. So before we actually pull up the mini planner and I walk you through it, I want to just talk about how we're going to organize these lessons. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to list all the units that are going to be on the exam. So if you know unit 1 to 8 straight through is on the exam, then I want you to put that on the tracker in the designated spot. If maybe perhaps only units 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 are going to be on the exam, those are the only ones you're going to list in the tracker. From there, you're going to pull open your notebook and you're going to start with Unit 1 and make sure you have every single lesson that your teacher has taught. You want it to be completely filled in so you have all that information that you need to study. Let's say you missed a day, or maybe you didn't copy down the entire lesson. Be sure to ask your teacher or maybe ask a friend to take a picture of theirs so you can fill it in and have everything needed. This one can't slip past us. Okay, so here in the planner, you have your part A questions to ask. So you've already filled these all in and you ask the teacher everything. So then you scroll here to part B. And this section is where you list all the lessons. If you're in grade 10, for example, the first one is solving linear systems. So you list that here as the title, and then you start doing your lesson titles in here. So let's see, for example, point of intersection with graphing is usually the first lesson I cover with my students. Then we'll move on to, I'll actually type this in with you, POI with substitution, and you keep going from there. So you list every single lesson that's in that unit that you have to study. Then you tally them up so you know exactly how many you have per unit. Keep going all the way until you finish all 8 or 9 units that are gonna be on the exam. Okay, from there, we wanna go to our calendar and mark our exam date because we're gonna start planning our study days backwards. We wanna know how many study days we actually have. And don't worry, if you have a full month before exams, that's ideal. Of course, the more time, the better, so we don't feel like we're cramming. But if you only have 2 weeks, this is just as manageable. If you're dealing with only a few days because you've been scrambling with all your other exams and keeping up with classes, that's okay too. We have different versions of how you can spread out your studying time. Okay, so once you've counted up all your lessons, we want to take this over to the calendar in your mini planner. The first thing we want to do is pin that exam date. So if you scroll down in your mini planner, you'll see I have an example of an exam date. I pinned it with a little cute emoji. And then from there, we want to start spreading out all the lessons we have to study. And that's why the lesson tracker is so important, because it gives you a sense of how many days you're going to need for each topic or for each unit leading up to the exam. So let's start spreading out your studying. Of course, if you have those 3 to 4 weeks before an exam to spread it out, that's obviously better. But this can be done with just 1 week of studying. It can be done with 2 weeks of studying. And we'll talk about cramming if you don't have that many days, but let's imagine that you do. Typically, a longer unit is going to need about 4 days of studying. That's if you're just studying in the evenings and you are at school all day long. If you have a semi-long unit, then it'll probably require 2 to 3 days, and then a very short unit, 1 to 2 days. So if you look at the planner and the month at a glance, let's imagine this is January when exams are at the end of the month. You pin your exam date. You hope to have your mock exam 2 or 3 days before, which means you want everything studied 2 or 3 days before your actual exam. So if you look here, I started putting my Unit 1 lessons on certain days so I can make sure everything fits and I hit that deadline of studying everything. Obviously on weekends you can study more. Yay! And on the nights you have extracurriculars or training, if you're an athlete, then you're going to study maybe for a half hour to an hour if you can squeeze it in. The purpose of a study schedule is to help keep you on track. Of course, it's never going to be perfect, so should you fall behind, then you try and compensate and rejig your schedule so that way you try to still hit that deadline for the mock exam. Now let's come back to the scenario where you don't have that much time to study. Maybe you only have 3 or 4 days. Maybe you only have 1 night. What you're going to do is spread out your lessons and just read them through and pick 1 question from each lesson, if that, to retry on a sheet of paper. Okay, let's get into our Zen study loop. I wanted to keep this super simple for you. A lot of times teachers will hand off exam packages. They will start reteaching lessons, which actually is really nice of them. But if you are just kind of left out in the dark, take your lessons, read them over, and just add a big idea to your study sheet. You're trying to capture the essence of the lesson, and you want to store it in your long-term memory, not just for the exam, but for next year's math class. And so by putting it on your big idea sheet, that's what we're doing. We're locking it in there and keeping it snug so we have it not just for the exam, but next year too. Now, what to include on your big idea sheet? So you want to include things like formulas, definitions, of course. For me, because I don't have great memory retention, then I would put my steps to certain familiar, like common problems on there. If you're in grade 10, for example, completing the square is a good example. You need to list the steps so you can kind of memorize them. Anything that you make common mistakes with, so your typical oops list of errors. And I like to memorize top questions that I know are going to be on the exam. So again, in grade 10, completing the square, factoring questions, just the big chunky stuff that we expect you to know and carry with you into your next math class. Okay, now we've arrived to the fun part. The mock exam. We need to stop in our tracks right now before we talk about this mock exam. I have to say the number one mistake students will make if a teacher gives a practice or mock exam to use as a study tool is they fall into the belief that this is what is going to help them ace the exam if they just study this. And unfortunately, a mock exam cannot cover it all. Even our mock exams, we've selected questions the best we can, but of course there are missing questions because an exam is only an hour and a half to 2 hours at best. So once you've studied everything, and I mean all your units to the best of your ability, we want to now see how you can retrieve and output that information in conditions that best mimic a test or exam-like scenario. So like I said, 2 to 3 days before is an ideal time to have your practice exam. You want to put a timer on to see if you can get that practice exam done within the 1.5 to 2 hours. You don't want to use any of your notes, no peeking. You want to do it in one sitting. And obviously we want to correct it once it's been completed. This is going to help us pick last minute things to study and give us a sense of control. So we're really strategizing and zeroing in on what our focus should be in the last 24 hours of studying. Okay, let's recap. First, with your little mini planner, you're going to ask all those amazing questions to your teacher and look like an all-star. Then you're going to build your lesson checklist. You're going to take all your lessons or the number of lessons you have to study and start backwards planning on your calendar. Pin that exam date, pin the mock exam date, and then start building in the days and what you want to study on those days. Once you actually begin studying, let's use our lesson looping. So you're going to read your lesson over, add the big ideas to your big idea sheet, practice a couple questions from that lesson, and move on to the next lesson. Loop it away. When you've studied everything, you're going to do your mock exam. And hopefully you have a set of corrections to go with that mock exam so you can see exactly where you went right and exactly where you went wrong. From there, make sure you rest, make sure you eat well, make sure you set your alarm the night before the exam, and just in the last 24 hours, pick and choose what you want to go through. It could just be your study sheets and maybe some questions that you know were giving you trouble, and leave it at that. So be sure to download that mini planner, start studying away. I hope this makes you feel more at ease about your studying. It helps you minimize what you're actually studying, and it gives you a timeline to work with so you feel a greater sense of control. If you have any questions at all, or you found this video useful, let me know down below and we'll be sure to help you out. Happy studying!